Boldly His podcast. We are filming for the second time.
This is our second take. The first one, the audio cut out halfway through. So
the enemy is trying to stop us. And
spiritual warfare, guys.
And he can't.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I can't say if you haven't been here, welcome, because none of you have been here. So welcome. What are people watching right now?
So, this is a podcast for young adults and just like young adults that are seeking the Lord and are looking to grow in their faith. And it's going to be very real. We're going to talk about some pretty real stuff. And yeah.
So, judging by the name, Boldly His, which funny story, how we actually
we forgot to tell this story last time.
So honestly, maybe that's why it didn't work.
Yeah, we just had to tell it.
This is just so important. I mean, we knew that we wanted to have bold in the name. And other than that, no direction whatsoever.
That was it.
So the only way to figure out what we should do
is to use ChatGPT, of course.
Because what else are you supposed to do?
That's obviously what you would do. And then you would also use it for the spelling of your logo, clearly.
Right.
And so if you saw our first Instagram post and you saw it spelled two separate different ways, both wrong, that would be me.
It would actually be a group effort. I did not notice and tried to log in with the correct spelling and was taken to someone else's Instagram. So
that's how we got there. Humble start.
Not Boldly His, not Boldly His. This is Boldly His. And this is a young adults podcast directed towards the kind of college-aged, high school-aged generation. Just kind of calling people our age to be a little bit more bold in their faith and, be willing to make changes and seek the Lord in a way that isn't exactly seen commonly nowadays. So there's a lot of things that are going to go into that, but that's kind of why we're doing this.
That's the gist.
That's the gist. Yeah. I think we both kind of come from spiritual backgrounds where we kind of feel like God's kind of put us in this position where we've been in leadership positions before. I've gotten to lead a discipleship group at my school. I've always been in, Young Life, Awana, different youth groups, church on Sundays, the whole thing. So I definitely feel, set up to be in this type of situation. I'm sure Faith feels the same, but
yeah, I got into ministry this summer and it's been amazing. I go to Grand Canyon, so as you can imagine, there's a lot of ministry young adult groups at GCU, and it's been amazing. It's been a big blessing.
Yeah, and even kind of on the flip side of that, I went to a very secular school in Minnesota, very minimal Christian influence around, which kind of taught me how to be intentional about seeking the Lord, on my own. It wasn't up to, my family, of course, since my family's in Colorado and school's in Minnesota, and it wasn't up to any kind of group on the team because that just wasn't really a thing. So kind of learning how to pursue God individually at 20 years old when you're very susceptible to different walks of life, definitely set up for doing something like this. And now we're both here at the same time.
We are back in the 303.
Back in 303.
If you know, you know. Love it here.
Yeah, so now we're here, and I think we've got some interesting things we're going to talk about in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I think on both of our hearts we wrote out a little list of subjects and just topics that young adults don't really talk about within the church even. And so we have a couple things. I know that next week we are going to be talking about something really exciting. And so this is just going to be kind of like an introduction episode. And we're going to tell a little bit of our testimonies. And then, we're going to get into some deeper subjects later on.
Well, as far as testimony-wise, I can kind of kick us off here and get going. Very blessed to have been raised in a Christian home, very much the success story coming from my parents' standpoint. Both of them didn't necessarily come from very strong Christian homes, but it was important to them that they raised their kids in the church, which obviously had a very big impact on my life. I grew up going to youth groups like several days a week, always the church on Sundays, and most, kids can attest that when they're growing up, you're complaining that, Mom, why are you dragging me here on Sunday? I wanted to go to a sleepover last night. But honestly, it couldn't have been more of a blessing ending up in that position. I got to, kind of be in the youth groups and then lead as I got into high school a little bit, which was really amazing. But I would say, as far as like where my walk with the Lord has kind of come from, a lot of it has been derived from sports, 100%. Grew up playing softball, playing since I was 5. Ended up making it to the college level, which is an absolute blessing. But the way that the Lord worked was not the way that I would have, written it out in my dream journal, but definitely more than I could have imagined at the same time. I think being in a place of the country that I wouldn't necessarily have chosen, and getting challenged in the sport in the way that I didn't want to. I wanted to, have this amazing success story of getting to thank the Lord at every one of my home runs and saying, it's God, that's why I was a starter my freshman year. But
God did.
It was God. But that's just not what it looks like. And actually, because I got to do that, I got to learn other ways to lean on the Lord, and just other things that were important in my life that I didn't really know at the time. And now I have such a bigger appreciation.
So I just start from like literally scratch.
Okay, so what is this? The third time recording? Third time, take 4. The phone just fell again. So, okay, so basically, a little bit about my testimony is that I was raised in a Christian family, church on Sunday, grew up going to private school, went to private high school. I had 2 brothers that played baseball their whole life, and I played softball all throughout childhood and high school. And so I went to private high school, and it was a blessing, but it also just, I became very complacent with my faith, and it was just something that I was like, yeah, I believe in Jesus, like, I don't really care how I live, because I didn't know what it truly meant to be a follower of Jesus. I was just like, yeah, I believe, and that's all I really need to do. Which was so far from the truth, but it took me a little bit to realize that. So my junior year of high school, I was in a really bad relationship, which I'm sure we will get a little bit more into as the podcast go on. But yeah, it was really hard, and when it ended, it just made me really question God for a lot that happened within the relationship, and I was really mad at God, and it was one of those situations where I was like, yeah, I'm still gonna believe, but I just didn't really want anything to do with him at the same time. So that was really hard, and I continued being lukewarm and complacent all throughout my senior year. And then I went to go play college softball in Utah, and yeah, I went through another heartbreak, and this one was just like, I hit rock bottom, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that I placed a lot of my identity in him, and just a lot of my value was in him, and yeah, so I just hit the point where I didn't know who I was anymore, and it led me to the Lord, thankfully, and it led me being like, okay, this is something that I need to do for myself, and I need to like truly seek Jesus and not just keep continuing on this path of like, oh yeah, I believe, but I just don't really care about how I live. Like, I wanted to like once and for all like really dive in. And so I did that, and I fell in love with Jesus and like truly started walking with him, and I started doing ministry over the summer, and I quit softball. Quit softball and transferred to Grand Canyon University, and I love it. And ministry's been a blessing, and it's been something that it's just been so cool to see, and just having that impact and having like similar stories to a lot of young girls, and just like, yeah, it's been a blessing, and it's really cool to see the Lord use things that you thought you'd be doing your whole life and taking them away. Like softball was something I thought I was going to do for at least 4 more years, and I had no plans on not playing anymore, and so that was something that the Lord definitely showed me his plan, and it's just crazy. It's really cool though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say your testimony was the best. The third, fourth time?
This is the fourth time. I don't know what else you want to say back to me. She's just sitting here listening for the fourth time.
I'm like, I've got your testimony memorized.
Yeah, she knows it. She can tell me. Brought me from where I was to now and used that situation to tell me, hey, look, basically, like, this is the way you were living, and I really, like, saw no problem with it. Like, I genuinely thought I was a true believer, and I didn't see any problem with the way that I was living, and I think he really used that as a blessing in disguise.
Well, that's even, you reminded me, the other thing that we didn't actually mention, the first time that we recorded tonight, is we're actually probably going to talk a lot about, like, what it means to be a Christian athlete.
Yeah.
Because obviously, about, like, both of our testimonies also has, you know, a lot of an impact around our relationship with sports and the softball over the years, and especially, you know, going to college softball or into college softball and not having it be the story that we were expecting. So yeah, that'll be a whole nother thing that we'll get to talk about.
Yeah, I think
as well.
I think just being a Christian athlete is very praised, I guess you could say. And whether you're walking it out or not, it's just kind of like, okay, like, this is the cool thing to do. And that's kind of how I was in my faith, is I just was like, oh, like, yes, I believe, yes, I'm a Christian, but this is, like, the cool and the popular thing to do. And it wasn't really coming from a place of, like, genuine, like, I am bought out, sold out for Jesus. And yeah,
I like that phrase. Bought out.
I'm bought.
Been
bought by Jesus. Been bought.
Yeah, not all. I mean, I'm sure that, like, you know, going to a private school was like, because obviously we have different stories in that, like, sense of everything, because it was obviously trendy, you know, at your school to be Christian, and it was like quite the opposite at mine. But also, like, both stories, you have to choose God, and you have to, you know, choose to live boldly in Him in different ways. So.
Yeah, and I think, which you can probably attest to too, softball was like my entire life. Like, I couldn't count on, I don't even know how many hands, the amount of hours I spent practicing, and just, it was like, it was a place for me of genuine, like, I could, like, zone out of whatever was happening in, like, real life, and I was like, this is, like, my safe spot. And I think that being a college athlete and, like, losing your love for the sport is really hard, and going through injury and all the above, all the things.
Yeah.
But yeah, just, like, if you would have told me my senior year of high school that I was gonna be done playing softball in a year, like, I would have been like, you're kidding. You're joking. Yeah, but it's cool to see that, like, our plans don't always align with God's, and it can be the best thing for us.
Yeah. No, I even feel like it's so easy to just, like, idolize relationships, especially in high school and in college, because that's what, you know, your life revolves around the relationship that you're in. So I think sometimes, you know, there's two sides of the coin of, you know, sometimes, like, God will let you live your life, your relationships free of trouble, so that you have no reason to turn to Him. But then on the other side of it is sometimes the Lord, you know, takes that away from you, so that you have to be like, all right, God, you were the number one man in my life, and I gotta fix that. So it's gotta be on the other side of it.
I think, too, just with being girls, like, the girls watching, you know, that it is a desire that's on a lot of our hearts, and I think that can be taken out of place a little bit, and that especially happened to me, and becoming, like, getting out of that made me realize how much more, like, Jesus really is the only thing that can fill you, like, really is. And one day you're gonna have a relationship that the other person complements you, but they don't complete you. And my entire life I was, like, looking for the person that was gonna complete me, and I never found it, and I just ended up feeling more empty and more empty, until I realized that, like, Jesus is the only thing that I need. And obviously that desire is still there, like, one day, Lord willing, I will find someone that comes along and is running the race with me, but definitely not someone to complete me. And I think it's really taught me what to look for, and
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Sometimes having those really bad relationships, it gives you such a, like, better vision of, like, yes, this guy was clearly designed in God's image, because look at his face, oh my gosh. But like, how is his heart, you know, like that's what's really matters. So yeah, I think it's cool that we both, you know, have these very unique ways of how we ended up, you know, actively pursuing God, especially both being raised in, you know, a Christian home. But you know, you can be raised in a Christian home and not truly have a relationship with the Lord, which is a completely different thing. So I think that's really what we're going to be, you know, challenging people here to do. And even with like all of that relationship talk, that's I think a lot of what we're going to talk about. Just you know, being two girls of our age, you know, this is a topic that needs to be talked about with girls that are our age as well, before they, you know, damage themselves in the process of being lost in what the world says is going to fulfill you. So hopefully we can provide a little guidance there.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's something that we are both very passionate about, and it's just something that gets talked about, but I would say very like sparingly. And so I think it's going to be cool to dive into that a little bit deeper. But just learning what it means to date God's way and like what you are looking for, and valuing what God values and like the characteristics that the Lord values over looks. And I think that's something that is a really big struggle in our generation. Is just lust and comparison and all the things like that. And I think that valuing what the Lord would value is so much more important, especially when you're looking for someone to run the race with you.
Yeah, I think that there's a whole different concept to completeness when it's someone who's walking with the Lord. And you and I have definitely gotten to see the, you know, bad side of that stone, which I think gives us that clear vision. But yeah, I'm definitely excited to see all the things we're going to dig into in that topic. But as far as outside of the relationships, the reason why we ended up naming this podcast, you know, Boldly His, I think the next question of what does exactly it mean to, you know, be boldly His?
Yeah, so Boldly His was something that we, the word boldly was on both of our hearts, and it was kind of funny because after we had got done talking about what it was going to be called and everything, I was like, you know, it's really funny. The other day I was reading Acts, and it talks all about how whenever they were preaching boldly, and it uses the word boldly. I counted it. I'll have to remind you guys next episode, but multiple times. And I thought that was so cool, and I had just written it down on a sticky note and put it on my wall, and I was like, this is something we should be praying for, is that we would be preaching boldly and proclaiming the gospel boldly. And then we sat down and we're like, something about boldly just really sticks out. And yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, and even like, you know, because she'd read through Acts, I ended up being like, all right, I can use a refresher going through Acts. So I'd ended up looking up, not sponsored, but the Bible Project. We mentioned this last time, but we'll just hit this again. If you are one of those people who is a little bit new to your faith, new to reading the Bible, it's obviously a very intimidating topic if you're not well versed in exactly how to approach that. A great place to go is going to YouTube and looking up whatever chapter of the Bible that you're reading, or book of the Bible. I'm saying chapter. Look up the book of the Bible that you're reading, and then type the Bible Project, and you'll get a very well explained summary of what exactly you're reading before you go into it. So I mentioned that because I did that before I went in with Acts, and it just kind of reminded me of the story with Saul Paul. And I think that that's kind of like this goal as you kind of go through these videos, and as we kind of get to touch on different subjects, is that you're able to kind of walk away from this experience like having spent time with the Lord and having, you know, sought his face and gotten to hear his word every time that we've gotten the opportunity to open it, and you kind of get to change who you are. And even if that means, you know, going a complete 360 in 3 days, you know, like he did, but being willing to not care about what others think about you and the changes that you're going to make, because at the end of the day, what the Lord says is good, and you know, he means that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, I mean, as we know that we are, like, our only purpose really here is to spread the gospel. And I think it can be something that's really intimidating, especially in young adult years, just because of the whole just like college scene and like the party scene and just everything that a lot of college kids prioritize. It can be scary to approach, or just being scared of judgment, like we've all been there. But just realizing that, like, he is so worthy. He's so worthy of putting yourself out there. And you never know who you're going to impact. I mean, I'm sure we both have. I've met multiple people throughout the year, just this whole year of doing ministry. And you would just never know, like, these people that are really struggling and really need to hear it and are really lost, and that you saying something and you being bold about it could change someone's life. And the Lord really does use people for his kingdom and to further it.
Well, there's even so many times where you don't even get to know all the lives that you touch sometimes. You know, like the whole concept of planting seeds, right, isn't necessarily like you're not the one that's making them grow, but the more seeds that you plant, the more that those, I want to say, like saplings are going to grow, and then they're going to end up spreading seeds on their own. And it might even just be one person that you reach, you know, if like we go through this whole process of making this podcast and everything, and there's, you know, that one person who's watching every week, and they actually go from this having learned things, and they actually, you know, apply it in their lives, and all of a sudden people are saying like, dang, that person is walking with the Lord, I want to be just like them. Like, that's going to be a success story for us as much as it is for them. And it's definitely a hard thing to not always get to see exactly the successes, but you know, God sees it, and that's what matters, is what he sees.
Right. And I think that just to touch on a little bit what you said, that it is not our job to water the seeds, but it is our job to plant the seeds. And like, I really do believe that whatever is on your heart the most, you talk about the most. Like, whatever you love the most, you talk about the most. And so I just really encourage you that, like, if you are following the Lord and you have been like a little bit standstill in your faith and you've just been kind of quiet about it, I would really encourage you, even if it's like one person that you can meet with and reach out to, or just find a way to serve someone else and to be the hands and feet of Jesus as we're called to be. And I think that's so beautiful, and I think that's something that should really be like on the forefront of our minds and our heart.
I would even say, like, obviously our time of like, you know, planning all of this hasn't necessarily been that long, but you know, I have my list of whatever friends that I'd say are very close that, you know, like I want to be in my wedding one day, that type of thing. But the list of friends that actually are willing to, like, you know, dig into the word, talk about scripture and like ways that we can actually be bettering people is so slim. And when you find, you know, a friendship like that, like I feel like that getting to do this together is like a really cool thing for both of our faiths. Definitely something to encourage, you know, anyone that's listening to look for that as well, because it's hard to find, but when you find it, you know, like there's a reason why the Lord wants us to have community and wants us to be iron sharpening iron, because it's a huge thing for your walk of faith at the same time.
Yeah, I would say my life like fully 360 when I got involved with community and like just took that step of getting involved with community, and it provides so much accountability that to the point where it's like, it's so good for you. Even if it's that one person that you're super honest with and you're like, hey, look, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I need you to hold me accountable with. And just being super transparent and not keeping it in the dark. It's life-changing. It really is life-changing. And even this summer, I had multiple people come to me about just being like super open and honest about things that they saw me struggling with, and they were like, called it out, and they were like, hey, is this something that you have like taken a look at? And in a loving way, as we were called to do for other believers, like, and it benefited me so much, and it helped me grow so much, and it was things that I really wasn't paying attention to. And I think that your close friends tend to see things that you don't, and it's really important. And just having that comfortability with going up to someone that you really love and you really care about and being like, hey, like, I love you, but have you seen this lately? Or how do you feel? Or like, what's your heart posture behind this action or whatever it is? Now, not to say that we're going to do that to everyone, because in the Bible it calls us to do it to our fellow believers. But I do think it's really important, and doing it in a kind way.
Yeah, learning how to humble yourself before the Lord and actually acknowledge the things that you need to change. And I think that, what's that phrase? When you're being convicted. Yes, being convicted of different things. Like, don't get me wrong, it's different for every person, but actually like acknowledging the things that you're feeling that conviction of, and like actually repenting it before God and being like, Lord, I need help with this. And sometimes the way that he delivers that is through a person calling it out, so that you can actually, you know, like look yourself in the mirror and be like, I need to change. But the same thing with that relationship goes with the relationship, you know, with God. As much as you want to have these strong relationships with your friends, like the Lord is supposed to be your friend at the same time. So if we aren't actually communicating with him every day, opening his word that is active and living and will say something different to you every time that you open it up, like if we're not doing that, you can't expect to have this close relationship with God. So if you're, you know, snapping your best friend every day, it's like you could be using that same time to be opening the word or sending up a little 30-second prayer. And I think that's one of the things we're really going to be challenging people to do, and you know, holding ourselves accountable to do it as well.
Yeah, I think that's something that she touched on that is such a good point, is that I heard someone, this is not from me, so I don't know who it's from, but I did hear someone say one time, like, think about God as your best friend in a sense, as like, if you're not talking to your best friend every day, you guys are going to grow apart. It's the same thing with Jesus. Like, if you are not spending time in the Word every day, or praying every day, or finding a way to get in his presence every single day, you're going to grow apart. And also just learning how to be transparent with God. Like, he sees everything you do. So going to him in prayer and not being transparent and honest, like he already knows that you have done whatever, or whatever you're struggling with. Being honest and being like, look, I'm really struggling with this, and I need your Holy Spirit to intervene and help me get through this. Because he already knows. Like, he knows the struggle. He knows what's going on in your mind. Like, so yeah, just bringing it and being honest, I think, is really special.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what's going to be fun, you know, about this whole process, is learning different ways to word things to challenge, you know, anyone that takes a listen or reviews and everything. Challenging relationship with God, and also, you know, being willing to change. That's kind of everything that's going to embody this whole concept of being boldly his, being transparent and authentic, and just a lot of the things that Christian culture isn't talking about enough anymore. So obviously we hope that as we kind of go through all of this, you know, we can hit whatever topics need to be hit. You know, if anyone has things that they have questions about, definitely to DM or comment or whatever. And, you know, we want to build this relationship with y'all as much as we have this relationship between the two of us. So
yeah, I think something that you guys can let us know, but maybe putting like a question box on Instagram every so often and be like, hey, what's something that you want to hear us talk about, or what's something that is a topic that interests you, whatever, every once in a while, so that we can also get feedback from you guys on what you guys want to hear us talk about. And just as far as next week, we're super excited for what we're going to be chatting about. I guess we can just tease it with saying that we're going to be discussing God's grace and how to appropriately use it and not to abuse it. Understanding what exactly it is and how to live through it in the best way. I don't know if you can explain that a little better. Yeah, I think something that's very common, once again, with young adult culture is abusing God's grace, and what the lines are between, hey, I don't feel convicted about this, but it's not about feelings, it's about what the Bible says, and it's about what the Lord has for you. Because I know that that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and like ourselves included. And I think that it's really important to talk about the difference between understanding that God has grace for you and not being like, okay, he has grace for me, so I can do whatever I want with that, and he's just gonna forgive me. And I know another common idea is like, oh, I'm gonna live out my college years and I'm gonna live however I want, and then I'm gonna go to God. And it's like, that is a direct reflection of misusing grace. And so we're excited to touch on
it. I'm sure that there's so many different, you know, parts of scripture that we're going to be able to whip out about the topic. So I think we're really excited about it, and it's definitely something that needs to be talked about for people in our generation or age. So I would definitely say to tune in next week when we chat about all these things. But I'm sure that we could just sit here and talk for forever, because we have so many things that we're so excited.
You guys should see us off camera. Literally the other day we were in my kitchen. And we just just start talking, and I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, we really gotta go like figure this out because we were like trying to plan for the podcast.
I'm like, write that down.
She's like, go back, and we were just chatting away. So
we've got a lot that we're cooking up. Yeah. So it's gonna be good.
Yeah.
But you know, Lord willing, that we will be able to get a video out, that it will record, upload.
We're doing it on a phone.
We're trying something new this time.
Not the best thing, but the camera decides to cut out the audio. So if this mic is not still working, I'm gonna be sad.
I know. I'm like, what are the odds
Please.
that it's like not
I'm
recording?
like, why
right
is the
now?
light not flashing?
The light's not flashing. So I guess we'll just sign off with hope that we're gonna make this happen and that the Lord's gonna help us.
Lord willing, I'm gonna work on this tonight, and I'm really wanting to get it out either tomorrow or Saturday because this is the second take, and usually we were gonna try to have it out by like Tuesday or Wednesday, and now it's Thursday.
Here we are. As long as the video's out before we're filming the next one, you know, it'll be great. If you felt encouraged with our video today, comment, subscribe, like,
follow us
all
on
the things.
Instagram,
Yes.
TikTok, YouTube, which hopefully you're watching. I think we're gonna try to figure out a way to set up a Spotify or even like an Apple podcast and get this out on there. But yeah,
all good things in the works. Thanks for sitting and watching our video.
yeah, thank you guys.
Jesus loves you, so do we. Have a good rest of your night. Walk boldly. We love you.
We love you.